All right, let's start with a prayer. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Dear God, please send your Holy Spirit to us. We remember the words of Jesus, when two or more are gathered in his name, there he is with them. So we just thank Jesus for being present with us. I pray for everyone who is on the retreat, for all the burdens that they are carrying, whether or not they be serious or not. We all have struggles. We all have things that we're dealing with. And so, God, I would just ask that you speak to the areas of struggle in their lives, and that you would give them joy and hope, consolation, strength, and help. Please guide me as I give this talk. I just ask that everything I say would be what you would want them to hear, and that we grow to love you and know your love more and more each and every day. Amen. Okay. Let's get down to business. My name is Mary Claire Galindo. I am from Maryland. I currently live in Missouri, which is why you're getting this video. I went to Mount DeSales. I went to Towson for college, studied psychology. Before I graduated from there, I did drop out and become a nun for a little bit, which is something I'm going to be talking about later. Since I graduated from, well, obviously I'm not a nun anymore, in case you couldn't tell. So left the convent, went back to school, then did a little bit of a service year in Oregon working with a Latino parish as a youth minister, then went back and taught psychology at Mount DeSales, then moved to Indiana, became a social worker. First, I worked with adults with mental illness, and then I worked with kiddos who were struggling with mental illness and poverty, and then moved to Missouri, where I have been working with kiddos with autism since I've been up here, and I also do some life coaching. Okay. What is this talk about? It's about discernment. For me, how I define discernment is figuring out what does God want me to do, and then what do I want, and then what do I choose, right? And we're not really talking about like, okay, for lunch, I need to discern, do I choose the peanut butter sandwich or the ham and cheese sandwich? We're not talking about that. We're talking about like consequential life decisions. So where should I go to college? What should I study? What job should I take? Should I break up? Should I get engaged? Should I get married? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we're going to be diving into that and my take on that. Okay, so once upon a time, I was an awkward 14-year-old who went on a retreat called Mount 2000. I believe they still have it going on. It's in, or it's held at Mount St. Mary's in Emmitsburg. So I went on this retreat. It's a pretty big retreat, lots of kids, lots of teens. And at the time, I was a lot more self-conscious. I was a lot more reserved, and I didn't like to stand out at all. Part of that is because I was homeschooled and then I transferred to middle school, and that's just kind of hard to do that gracefully. So 14, struggling with a lot of insecurities, go to this retreat, and me and my best friend at the time, we went to, they had adoration where the host is exposed, usually in a gold apparatus thing, and they had it going all night long. So you could come and go and sit and pray during the night. My friend and I decided to go pretty late, probably around midnight-ish. And we go and pray, and there's not a lot of people in there. There's probably like 10, maybe 15, but not a ton. And I start praying, and we're praying an appropriate distance away from the monstrance that's in the center. And I get this feeling that I should go and kneel on the velvet kneeler that's in front of the monstrance. And I did not want to do that because I don't know. First of all, I wasn't even sure if I was allowed to. I'd only ever seen the priest do it. So I'm like, I'm not even sure this is kosher if I do it. And also I didn't want to look weird. Like, I'm going to be sitting in the middle with everyone looking at me. And even though there was 15 people, I am an awkward 14-year-old girl and I don't want people looking at me. I want to blend in. So I'm like, that's crazy. I'm not going to do that, because that thought just came into my head. So I'm praying, and I just like feel this thought, like, you should go up, you should go up, you should go up, you should go up. So finally I'm like, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to go up. I'm going to kneel on the little kneeler thingy, and I'm just going to do it for like 2 seconds. And then I'm going to get up and go back to my little safe spot, right? So I go up, do my little sign of the cross, and like I'm trying like not to look at anyone, because I don't want to see like, is anyone looking at me, like is this like not okay, I don't know. And I'm saying my prayers, and then I look up at the monstrance, and it's really difficult to explain, but the best explanation that I can give is, have you ever felt like you're in a room by yourself, and then you turn a corner or someone, and you realize you're not alone? Like, you thought you were alone, and then you realize there's another human being in the room, and you're like, oh, you're there. Oh, sorry, I thought I was here by myself, right? That's how it felt. I was sort of praying, and up until that point, I believe I was praying sort of like God wasn't there. And then in that moment, there was just this sense of like God's presence, like, oh my God, like he literally, like he's there, right? Like I can just sense it, right? And I sort of panicked, because I was like, okay, God's real. And I was like, what do I do? Like, I guess I pray for everybody that I know. So I literally started listing every single person. I was like, pray for this person, pray for this person. Then I got to the end. I was like, okay, God, thanks for telling me you're real. Good talk. Like, I'm going to get up now, go back to my spot. So later in this retreat, I have another experience that I'm going to go into in the next video, but that sort of was my first personal encounter with God, and true to form, it was awkward and kind of weird, but it meant a lot to me, and it really transformed my life. So later in the retreat, we have a nun give a talk, and she was like really cool and like funny and witty and all of these things. And the talk really resonated with me and my best friend, who was also on the retreat. And later that night, we're in our like little sleeping bags on the gym floor, right? And I was like, Judy, are you asleep? She's like, no, I'm not, right? I'm like, I have a question. It's so dumb. It's such a dumb question. Like, I don't even know why I'm answering. I did not really talk like this. I'm doing this for dramatic effect. And she's like, oh, like, whatever. Like, if it's a dumb question, just ask me. And I was like, do you see me becoming a nun or getting married? And she was like, oh, definitely getting married. Like, I was like, I know, it's so dumb. Like, why did I even ask that question? It's so stupid. Like, I'm definitely going to get married. And I was like, how about you? And she's like, oh, definitely getting married. And I was like, yeah, like, we're going to get married and like live next door to each other and have a swimming pool that goes across both of our yards so our kids can play in it, blah, 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 blah. So we have that conversation, and then this happens. We get to the end of the retreat, and like everyone's on a Jesus high, like, woo, Jesus. Like, they had really good music, and the talks were really great, all this stuff. So we get to the end, and I will never forget, I believe his name was Father Brent, and he was from Georgia, and he had a strong Southern accent, and he was, I believe he was like the president of the seminary at the time, but he was like an important priest. And he gets up to the microphone, and we're all like, it's at the closing mass, we're all feeling great. And he says, I hope you guys have had a great retreat, blah, 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 blah. And then he says, now, I want you to take a second and close your eyes and just let the Lord speak to your heart. Now, I grew up in a very strict Catholic home, and we said our Hail Marys and our Fathers. We did not do any like freestyling prayer. So I was like, I don't know if this is like super Catholic, but a Catholic priest is telling me to do it, so I guess I'm gonna trust this. So I closed my eyes, and I don't know if you guys have ever like looked at a bright light, and then when you close your eyes, you still see the light, like the impression of the light, right? But like, it's kind of like those bright colors. And when I closed my eyes, I saw YES exclamation point. And I go, I knew this whole like close your eyes and like letting Jesus talk to you thing was stupid. Like, yes to what? Like, I didn't even ask a question. This is stupid. So I see yes. And then the next thing out of the guy's mouth, he's like, I want you to keep your eyes closed, But in that moment, if the Lord was calling you to consider a vocation to the priesthood or a vocation to religious life, keep your eyes closed, but I want you to raise your hand. And I'm like, oh snap, that's what that yes was for. And I'm like, but my best friend is sitting shoulder to shoulder, right? And I don't feel her arm move, right? And at the time, my best friend's opinion meant everything to me, right? More than anybody else, right? And she doesn't raise her hand. So I'm like, but I know that Jesus told me yes. Like, what are the chances I see YES? It's never happened before. And then the priest asks this question, like, so I raised my hand, but I raised it like in the most non-committed way that I could do it. When we still have our eyes closed, right? And then he goes, thank you for taking that act of courage. Now, I'm going to ask you to take one more step of courage, and I want you to stand up. And I'm like, oh, like raising my hand when our eyes are all closed is one thing. Standing up in front of all of these different people that I don't know. And my mom was a chaperone. And I don't know why, but like, I felt like, talking to your mom about sex is awkward, but then like talking to your mom about becoming a nun is somehow more awkward. Like I felt like in my scale of awkwardness, that's even worse. I was like, I don't want my mom to talk to me about this. This is so awkward. But I stand up. And I look over me and my best friend is standing up. And we're both like, you stand up. And she's like, I was like, I didn't feel your arm go up. And she's like, I didn't feel your arm go up. So what had happened is like we were sitting next to each other and we had raised our outside arms. So we were both having this identity crisis and like worrying what the other person. And then we were both standing up. Fun fact, she is still a nun. She's making her final vows this summer. So yes, she also has a great story. But I want to move on. Fast forward, I'm a freshman in college, and we go on another retreat that's called Seek. It's a focus retreat, and it was in Florida, which is a very nice location. And I went, and my vocation, like, should I get married? Should I become a nun? Should I get married? Should I become a nun? I was really wrestling with that during this retreat, and I was really hoping that Jesus would give me an answer on this retreat, that he would, like, appear out of the clouds and be like, Mary Claire, this is what you should do. That did not happen. So I come home, and at the time I had a spiritual director, a really great guy, who was a priest, and I'm telling him about the retreat, and he was like, well, like, did you pray about your vocation? I was like, yeah, I prayed about my vocation. I was like asking Jesus and being like, should I do this? Should I do that? I don't know. And he said, well, Mary Claire, it doesn't sound like you spent a lot of time in silence. And it felt like he was throwing some shade, okay? And nothing motivates me quite as much as shade. So I was like, I'm going to show him, like, I'm going to go to adoration and pray for, hours until I figure this out. So I do. I go to adoration, and I think I stayed there for 2 hours straight. And I just kept hammering, like, God, like, what am I supposed to do with my life? What am I supposed to do with my life? And, I think my urgency really was rooted in fear, unfortunately, because I feel like I tend to be more anxious and I tend to be more scrupulous. And I felt like at that time, if I didn't figure out the answer to this question of what should I do with my life, that I wouldn't really be able to get to heaven, or I wouldn't be able to be a good person, or like if I chose wrongly, I was going to mess up my whole life. And what I really felt God say to me at the end of that adoration, he was like, Mary Claire, like, you can be a saint and get married, and you can be a saint and be a nun. Like, I'm not going to tell you what to do. You get to choose. And I was shocked by that, because I had been focused so much on, like, what does God want? What does God want? What does God want? What does God want? That I didn't really think, what do I want? And I thought about it, and I said, well, God, like, I think being a nun is better. Like, that's the best way to love you. So I'm going to choose being a nun. And shortly after that, I did what they call like come and sees. And the order that I joined had a lot of things that I was looking for. They were missionaries. They were multicultural. They were originally founded in Argentina. They had a lot of young people in them. It was like very vibrant. So yeah, it was just like a lot of the things that I was drawn to. So I ended up joining that order, and I will tell you how I discerned out in a second. Okay, so then I enter with the nuns and I live happily ever after. The end. Okay, that's how a lot of vocation stories go. That's not how mine went. So something that I hope you guys have been talking about or have at least heard is the idea of like, okay, when I get into a romantic relationship, I want my romantic relationship to be emotionally healthy, and this is what abusive behaviors look like, blah, 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 blah. I felt like as a teenager, I had talked with my peers and had heard about what makes a good romantic relationship, but I didn't really know how to look for a healthy order of nuns. Because it's just kind of an unusual life path. So I didn't really know the questions to ask. I was 20 years old at the time, 19 when I entered. So I got in there and it wasn't a good fit for me. And, some aspects were great. I loved all the women there. All the women who were discerning with me were the best people you'll ever meet. Like people who I really think had hearts of gold and really just wanted to help people and love Jesus. So that was really amazing. I really loved having time to pray and all of those things, but I didn't do well with all the structure, all the rules, and my order that I joined was a younger order. It was only 25 years old. And so usually when you join a younger order, they're still fixing some things. And 25 years sounds like a long time, but a lot of these religious orders, like the Dominicans, the Franciscans, they've been around for hundreds of years, right? So relatively speaking, a religious community that's 25 years old is still very young and still working on getting established and all those things. So the community I joined was not very emotionally healthy, and I wasn't doing well, and I wanted to go, but my superior at the time didn't think I should leave. And one thing that was unhealthy about the place that I was at was that they made it seem like if the superior didn't agree with you, then you must be hearing God wrong. So I was really struggling because I'm like, I am unhappy here. I'm not doing well here, but my superior thinks I should still stay here. So like maybe I'm not hearing God, like maybe. So I prayed so hard. I prayed really, 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 really hard. Asking God, I'm like, okay, if you want me here, like, help me to like it more. Help me to appreciate these things, because I just don't think this is really me. And but my superior, no matter what I said, she just kept saying like, oh, well, I think you should give it more time. I think you should do this. So finally, I had a spiritual director in the convent, and I asked him, I said, do you think this is my fault? Like, am I blocking like what God is supposed to be telling me, or, and he looked at me and he said, I think you've paralyzed yourself. I think you aren't moving forward and you aren't moving backward. And that made me really angry. It made me very, very angry. And I actually got up and left. Because I was begging God. That if he wanted me to stay there, that he would give me the grace. And this sounds very dramatic, but it's true. I went to the bathroom and I looked at myself in the mirror and I was like, they're not going to tell you to go, Mary Claire. Like, the only people who are going to tell you to go is you. And when I realized that, I went to the Mother Superior and I was like, up until this point, I was kind of looking for you to agree with me, but looks like that's not going to happen. I am leaving. I'm not asking anymore. I'm going to do it. And my parents picked me up the Tuesday after that. So what does that experience mean? What did I take away from it? Number one, there are healthy orders. Mine, like I said, wasn't, but there are a lot of healthy orders of nuns. And my best friend that I mentioned in the story, she's with one and she's living her best life and, traveling. She was in Austria and, has done all these like really awesome things. So I think just like there can be bad boyfriends, that you have, or bad girlfriends or whatever. Just because you have one bad boyfriend doesn't necessarily mean like you shouldn't ever date again, right? But what I wish people had talked to me about was how to pick out a healthy order and to pick an order that valued mental health. And because there are that are very supportive of mental health and counseling and being open, because I was suffering from depression. It was really affecting me and I needed to get out and I needed to get counseling and all of those things. I met my other best friend, while I was there. She also left. She is the executive director of a parish out in California, one of the most amazing people you'll ever meet in your life. I'm so happy that I have her friendship. But what did that experience teach me? Like, I think up until I entered the convent, I was really following whatever my parents said, and this isn't me telling you to not listen to your parents, but my parents were really into like, get a good degree, make good money, live like a comfortable lifestyle. And that just wasn't important to me. And I really felt a call to follow Jesus more radically, which is why I left college and I pursued religious life. And so that was kind of a step, is like, okay, even though I love my parents, they don't speak for God. Like, that's between me and God. And then when I entered the convent, even realizing like the superior didn't speak for God, and technically they speak for God if you take final vows, blah, 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 blah. But I was discerning, right? So I took away from that experience, no one can tell me God's will. People can advise me, but at the end of the day, like, God speaks to me here. And no one can hear that better than me. And having the confidence to follow that and to believe that and to really hold on to that, like, this is where the Lord speaks to me, and you can't tell me what it is, and that's freeing. And it's also scary, because it would be nice if someone could just like tell me what the right things to do in my life are, but that's what discernment is. It's listening to the voice of Jesus, of God in your heart, and then choosing your path, right? So really quick, I ended up, how did I discern meeting my husband? I actually met my husband on Tinder during the pandemic, and he was in Peru at the time, but because everyone was stuck at home during the pandemic, Tinder was doing this thing where you could drop your location anywhere. And he has a sister who's married to an American who lives in St. Louis, so he picked St. Louis. And we matched, and I really liked him a lot, and we were talking, and then I asked him where he was from, and he was like, Lima, Peru. And I was like, oh, you're from there, but you live in the Midwest, right? He was like, no, I live in Lima, Peru. I was like, okay, this is never going to work. This is so dumb. Of course, the only person that I like that I meet on a dating app is actually on a different continent. But really liked him a lot, and we did a phone call, and I really enjoyed the phone call, where we were just kind of like getting to know each other. And then on the second phone call, we started talking at 8 p.m., and we talked until 4 a.m. So we talked for 8 hours straight. And I wrote down, like, I fell to my knees after that phone call, and I just thank God, because I was like, this is the man I'm going to marry. I just knew it. Now, did we have some bumps? Like, yes, like, he had to get over here, we had a date, we had to get married, we had to do all this. But I just knew. And I'm not saying that's not perfect discernment. You should really pray about it. And I did. I prayed about it and whatever. But, like, my husband has always loved me exactly as I am. He's always embraced me, and he's always brought out the best in me. And he loves my faith. He loves my connection to God, and we share that, and we pray together. And it's really beautiful. And yeah, so I think that he just felt like my home. That's how I discern that, is when you feel like you're home with a person or with an order or whatever, like, take that seriously. That's very special. Okay. All right. So let's bring in what I want you to take away from this. What I want you to take away is I actually don't think it's a really huge thing you have to think about, like, should I be a priest? Should I be a nun? Should I get married? I don't actually think that's something you really need to focus on, especially as a young person. I think what you need to focus on is loving yourself, okay? Because whether or not you're a priest, a nun, single, whatever, right? And singlehood is a legit vocation. I have friends who live that vocation really beautifully. Whatever you're called to do, you need to love yourself, right? You need to love God, right? And you don't need to love God, right? But life is way more fun when you do. And oftentimes if we have reservations about God, it's because we're taking what other people have told us or modeled for us about God, and we take that as truth and project that onto God. I would encourage you to get to know God in your life from your perspective. Because if you do that and you interact with God on a personal level, you realize he's just like really great and like helps you out and cares about you and loves you and wants you to be you and wants you to be free and wants you to be happy. And that's what he does, and that's what he cares about. So love yourself, love God, and work on your mental health, because wherever you are, your mental health is so important. So, and mental health is hard if you're a teen at this age. The pandemic was hard, and then you have social media, and you're just constantly being told you need to be something that you're not, So work on identifying what you need to work on as far as mental health, like your coping strategies, or how you view yourself. Like, do you view yourself in a loving way? Do you know who you are yet? That's the other thing, is like finding out who you are leads you where you need to go. What do you believe in? What do you care about? Like, what do you want to do? It's so exciting. You have no directions that come with you when you're born. You get to figure it out, and you're each just like this amazing person with unique interests and likes, and there's so much you can do, and I believe it was Saint Irenaeus who said, the glory of God is man fully alive. Like, become fully alive, become fully you. And I truly believe that if you do that, you love yourself, you love God, and you take care of your mental health, wherever you land, you're going to flower and you're going to blossom and you're going to love it. And it's going to be great. It does. Believe me, it's really great.